Hello students, welcome to this video tutorial on converting decimals, fractions, and percents. Alright, so before we start, it's very important that you have your calculator out. It's really going to help. Okay, so let's begin with section A, convert fractions to decimals. So we're going to start with giving you a fraction, and then I want you to convert it to a decimal. Well, these questions are very easy as long as you remember one rule. Whenever we have a fraction, this middle line in between the numerator and the denominator simply means divide. So the fraction actually tells you what to do. We're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So if we write it out, if we show all our steps, this is what it's going to look like. Now, the good thing about writing all your steps is if you go through the practice of writing the steps, then it really helps you to remember the steps. So we have the numerator, 7, divided by the denominator, 10. So if you use your calculator, type in 7 divided by 10, and we should get a nice clean answer. Okay, I'll wait for you to get it. All right, did you get 0.7? Okay, nice and clean, no other decimals behind the tenths column. Okay, so numerator divided by denominator. Okay, let's go on to question 2. 11/21, a very unusual fraction. Again, this middle line here means divide. 11 divided by 21. So write out what you're going to do. 11 divided by 21. And then type it into your calculator. 11 divided by 21. So if I use my calculator over here, sometimes we don't get such a clean decimal answer. We get a big mess like this. So when you get something like this, what I want you to do is always remember to go to 3 decimal places. So we have 0.523. Okay, and then I would just want you to cut the rest of the numbers off. 3 decimal places, 1, 2, 3. Now we have to put the 0 in the ones column because that's a placeholder. Okay, 0.523. So 11/21 is actually 0.523, just over a half. Okay, so let's go on to question 3. What do you notice that's different about question 3? Well, this is what's called a mixed number. We have a whole number and then a fraction. Okay, a whole number and a fraction means a mixed number. So for this question, what we're going to do is we're just going to ignore the whole number for now, and we're just going to concentrate on the fraction. So if we concentrate on the fraction, we do what we normally do, numerator divided by denominator, 3 divided by 7. If I go over here to my calculator, 3 divided by 7 equals, and I get another messy decimal answer. So let's use the rule, 3 decimal places. So we have 0 in the ones column as a placeholder, 428. Okay, now before you think we're done, there's still one more step. Remember how at the beginning we said we're going to ignore the whole number? So now we're going to bring the whole number to fill the ones column. So this is going to be 4 decimal, and then the decimal answer after that doesn't change, 4.428. 4.428. So remember this part. This is kind of the step that a lot of people forget to do here, is that when we first forget about the 4, the whole number, we have to remember to put it back in our answer right at the end. Okay, let's go on to section B. Now we're going to convert decimals to fractions. So we're going to go in the opposite direction, decimals to fractions. And whenever we write a fraction, we always want to write it in its lowest terms. Okay, so this is how we go about these questions. So we look after the decimal place. We look for the last number in our number. So in this case, the last number is a 4. So we have to determine what place value column is that 4 in? Well, it's in the tenths column. So the tenths becomes the denominator. So what's the numerator? Well, the numerator is simply the number after the decimal place. So the number after the decimal place is a 4. So 0.4 equals 4 tenths. That makes sense. It's a 4 in the tenths column. Now, before we move on, we always have to ask ourselves, is this fraction in its lowest terms? Well, because the numerator and the denominator are both even numbers, we know that we can divide both the top and the bottom by 2. Now again, showing all your steps. So let's work on the numerator. The new numerator will become 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. The new denominator is 10 divided by 2, which is 5. Okay, now we always have to keep asking ourselves, is this the lowest term? Is there a number that can divide evenly into both the top, the numerator, and the denominator? Well, no, the only number that can divide into the numerator is 2, and 2 cannot divide into the denominator. So we have our fraction in its lowest terms, 2/5. 0.4 is actually 2/5. Okay, let's go on to number 2. So again, first thing, I want you to determine the last digit. Okay, the last digit is 8. What is the place value column of the last digit? Well, let's go from here. We have the decimal, then we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So because the 8 is in the thousands column, the thousands is the denominator. It's going to be whatever over 1,000. So how do we get the numerator? Well, the numerator, we simply read the number after the decimal place. The number after the decimal place is 378. Don't put the decimal here, okay? The decimals don't belong in fractions. Okay, so is this number in its lowest form? 378 is an even number. 1,000 is an even number. So what number do we know can divide into both the top and the bottom? Well, we know that 2 divides into both the top and the bottom. So if you use your calculator, 378 divided by 2, and what do you get? Hopefully you got 189. And then 1,000 divided by 2, maybe you can do that mental math. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. Okay, so we've reduced it one step by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 2. We get a fraction of 189 divided by over 500. Now, you have to ask yourself, is that in its lowest terms? Well, the top number is not an even number, but the bottom number is. So we know that 2 won't work into the numerator. So if we kind of do some checking with the calculator, we can determine that this is actually, in fact, in its lowest terms. Even though the numbers are very large, it is actually in its lowest terms. Okay, so let's go on to number 3. Number 3, you'll notice something different about number 3. It has a whole number. So what we want to do is, as we did in a previous question, we want to ignore that whole number for now. All right, let's treat the rest of the question exactly the same. What is the number? The final number is 5. What decimal place, what place value column is that in? Again, it's the tenths, hundredths, thousands. So we're going to have a denominator of 1,000 again. Okay, so what's the numerator? The numerator, we read the number after the decimal place. Well, the number after the decimal place is 0.25. Well, whenever we say the number 25, we never put 0 in front of it. So it's simply 25 over 1,000. Now, if you know anything about the relationship between 25 and numbers that end in 0, you know that 25 can divide into those numbers. So let's divide both the numerator and the denominator by 25. Now, if you wanted to divide the numerator and denominator by 5, that would be fine. It's just that you'd have to do it 2 times. This time, we can only reduce in one step. So 25 divided by 25 is 1. 1,000 divided by 25, if you check on your calculator, is 40. Okay, so we're not done. Remember, we've got to bring this whole number down, and create a mixed number. So we put 7 outside of the fraction, and then we add the fraction here. So 7.025 is actually a fraction of 7 and 1/40th. Okay, so that's section B. Let's go on to section C, converting to percents. Okay, so when we start with a fraction, we have 2 steps. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. So let's just put a little 1 here for step 1. So 1 divided by 4. Okay, we're going to talk about section A, the skills we learned in section A, converting a fraction to a decimal. So 1 divided by 4, if you check on your calculator, or if you can do that mental math, is 0.25. Okay, so that's step 1. We made the fraction into a decimal. Now, we're not finished because we've got to go one step further and we've got to make it into a percent. Okay? So, in order to change a decimal into a percent, it's very simple. We take the decimal and then we multiply it by 100%. Now, we practiced the skill just a little while ago. Whenever we multiply by 100, all we have to do is we have to move the decimal place 2 places to the right. Okay? And if we do that, we get a nice percent of 25. Okay, don't put the decimal here because it's a whole number, 25%. Okay, so there are 2 steps involved in these type of questions. Okay, let's go on to number 2. So number 2 is very similar to number 1 in terms of the steps we use. So step number 1, what did we do? We converted the fraction to a decimal. So in order to do that, we divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay? I want you to use your calculator to solve that decimal answer. Now when we use our calculator, we get not such a nice decimal, not such a clean decimal. So remember the rule is that whenever you write a decimal, go to 3 place value columns after the decimal place. So we get 0.333. This is actually a repeating decimal, but we're going to cut off all the other 3's. Okay? So remember to go to 3 decimal places. Okay, step 2. We take our new decimal answer, decimal 333, and then we multiply it by 100%. Remember, fraction means 100%. Okay, so all we have to do is we have to move the decimal place 2 places to the right, right there. Okay, so what is our final answer? Hopefully you got 33.3%. Okay? All right, let's go on to number 3. What do you notice that's different about question 3? Well, question 3, it's already given, the question is already given to us as a decimal. So we don't need to do step 1 where we convert the fraction to a decimal. We only need to do step 2. So that's pretty easy. So let's write out step 2, 0.145 times 100%. Okay, so again, let's use our little rules here. Move the decimal place 2 places to the right. And what did you get as the final answer? Hopefully you got 14.5%. Okay, so let's look at question 4 here. Very similar to question 3, except there's a whole number. Okay, but don't let that intimidate you. So all we have to do is we take the whole number, 1.16, the entire number I should say, and we multiply it by 100. We don't need to ignore the whole number at this point. Okay. So let's move the decimal place 1, 2 places to the right. And what do you get as a final answer? 116%. Okay? Now I know when we're young, when we're first kind of introduced to the notion of percents, we always are taught that the maximum is 100%. But in terms of the math world, in terms of numbers, there is no maximum to the amount of percent. So when you see 116%, don't tell yourself, oh, that's not right, because I was taught that nothing can be over 100%. Okay? All right. So in section D, different type of question, but it's very similar. Is that what you're going to do is you're going to combine all of the skills on this sheet. Arrange these numbers in ascending order, okay? Or another word for ascending order, you know, is numerical order. And what does numerical order mean? It simply means least to greatest. So the problem is the three numbers are all in different forms. We have a percent, we have a decimal, and we have a fraction. So, if you've been paying attention to this video, hopefully you've kind of concluded that percent is kind of the last calculation. It's kind of the final number in terms of our conversion calculations. So whenever we see a fraction, a percent, we just leave that percent because that's kind of the form of the number that we want. So now we have to change the other two numbers to a percent. So I'm going to clearly show my work here. So I'm going to work on the fraction first. So what did we do to a fraction to make it a percent? If you look up here to section C, you'll get an idea. There are two steps. Step one is that we convert the fraction to a decimal. We divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay? So I want you to use your calculator. What do you get when you divide 4 divided by 20? So this time we got a nice clean decimal of 0.2. Okay, we're not finished yet. Now we've got a decimal and we want to make it a percent. So what do we do at this point? We take our decimal and what do we multiply it by? We multiply it by 100%. Okay? So that's very easy to do. We move the decimal place 2 places to the right. Now in this case, we get 20% because the decimal moved from here 1 place, 2 place. We can't just leave this place value column empty. We have to have a placeholder of 0. So we've got 20%. So 4 over 20 is actually 20%. Okay, so now let's work on this calculation over here, 0.21. Now, when we have a decimal, remember it's pretty easy to convert it to a fraction. We simply multiply it by 100%. Exactly. Okay, I'm going to use my other color here. I'm going to move the decimal place 1, 2 places to the right. And then we see that this number is actually 21%. So I'm going to put the brackets under here, 21%. Okay, so now let's arrange these numbers in ascending order. Ascending means least to greatest. Okay, so which one is the least number? Well, it looks like this is the least number. Now, in your final statement, I don't want you to put 20% because 20% was not given as one of our choices. The answer, or the form of the number, was a fraction. So we have 4 over 20 is the smallest number. And then that is less than, what's the next largest number? Well, it's 21%, but 21% was actually given to us as a decimal of 0.21. And then the largest number is 24%. And we can write 24% because it was given to us as a percentage. Okay, so that's how I want you to solve those type of questions. Basically, you're using all the skills from this video. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.